All right, good evening. It is 6 p.m. by the clock here in Mumbai Watch as well. So welcome to the Santa Barbara Airport Commission meeting, the first of the year for 2026. Mo, will you do us the honor of a roll call?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioner Houghton,
Here.
Commissioner Bowen,
Here.
Commissioner Gregg,
Here.
Commissioner Grabman,
Here.
Commissioner Maya,
Here.
and Chair Glazier.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mo. Chair Hastert, Director Hastert, do we have any changes to the agenda tonight?
No changes to the agenda.
Thank you very much. It is duly noted that on Thursday, January 15th, 2026 at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda to the bulletin board at the Airport Administration Building. And we do have a few speaker slips tonight. I'd like to start at this point with Barbara Chen.
Okay. Well, first, thank you very much. I just have a few small requests. Hello? Okay. Just have a few small requests. First, in October, I was driving to the airport, and the 217, the freeway off-ramp, was completely shut down due to road maintenance. And I had just checked the website, the airport website that morning, and there was nothing about one of the access routes to the airport being closed. So I didn't know, so I had to detour around. So my request is that if one of the access routes to the airport is closed and passengers have to detour, could you post something on the website so that passengers will know, so that they can prepare in advance? Also, I did notice on the website that there are therapy dogs of Santa Barbara that go to the airport, and as a psychology major, I think that's a fabulous idea. I love that idea. I was wondering if you could post a monthly schedule of when the therapy dogs are expected to be at the airport, or if they already have a schedule on their website, could you post a link to their schedule so that passengers who are coming and going will know if they happen to be there at the same time, because that's really a fabulous idea. Okay, finally, I was a volunteer at the Triennial Disaster Drill, which was great. It was a wonderful experience, and I'm glad to have been able to participate. But I have to say, the parking lot where the volunteers were asked to park, that was a disaster waiting to happen. And I'm not even sure I would call it a parking lot. It was basically a dirt lot, and it was uneven. There were rocks, and it was. I drive a Miata. I barely made it in and out of there, barely. And if something had happened to my car, I would have contacted the airport about damages. I will tell you that honestly. I was very concerned. So my request is, I'm begging you, before the next triennial disaster drill, could you find or create some a paved lot for the volunteers to park to make sure that nobody has any problems or nobody incurs damages or injuries? Please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. We do have two other speaker slips. However, they pertain to items that are on the agenda, so we will move forward with the public comment. Were there any other speaker slips? Was that it? Okay. Moving on to number 4 on the agenda, the election of the officers. This is obviously an annual thing that we do, and at this point, the way we've done it in the past is we've asked for nominations. And so starting with that, is there anyone that wants to nominate anyone for?
I'm on it. That's the one I want to speak about.
Correct. The procedure is that we would take nominations and then ask for the public comment. Thank you, Sean. Director Houghton.
I would like to make a motion.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Dan Glazier as chair and Levi Maya as vice chair of the Santa Barbara Airport Commission for 2026. I would like to continue with our continuity that we've had exhibited so well this past year. I appreciate both of your outstanding leadership. So.
Thank you.
I'd like to second that motion.
Are there any other nominations? Any discussion? All right, this time I'd like to call for public comment. Sean.
Makes my comment null
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, so at this time, then we would have to have a motion. Can I get a motion? Repeat the same.
I will make an additional motion, again, to nominate Dan Glazer as chair and Levi Mai as vice chair of the Santa Barbara Airport Commission for 2026.
Thank you. And a second. Paul? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The vote passes unanimously. Thank you for your vote of confidence. Appreciate it. All right, and moving on to liaison reports. Councilman Friedman, you are here. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome back. Congratulations on another term as chair and vice chair. I don't have much to report tonight. I just wanted to just briefly, I gave somewhat at the Library Commission's Advisory Board, a little different because you're enterprise fund, but just in general, this year the city overall for the general fund is facing a $13 million deficit projected for the next fiscal year. And so as part of that, over the past few months or past year or so, the staff have come together, each department, including the airport, and instead of just saying we're going to make cuts, we really wanted to look at holistically at how we can look at the budget in terms of revenues, additional revenues, but also efficiencies, and then also new ideas out there for how we can run our departments more effectively. And so the staff really were allowed to become creative and look at different things. And so there's over 200 recommendations that came forward to council. And so the staff, we're going through those now, and those are going to be part of the budget discussion this year. And there's a lot that the airport is doing to improve its efficiencies here. We are looking at enterprise funds and how we can really utilize those and generate revenue for the city overall. I mean, the better the airport does, the better the city does. So that's an ongoing challenge that you'll be hearing more about coming up. And then there is a council retreat just on procedures related to the council that's coming up. And that will be taking place next week. So we're really kind of getting into budget season coming up this year. So that's really what I have right now, and just want to appreciate everybody for your service and coming back for another year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Call on Director Hastert at this time to give the director's report. Oh,
Just have a couple of quick items, because one of the big topics of conversation obviously will be the flooding that we had at the airport. We have a full presentation on that tonight. So not in your packet because the numbers came in a little bit late, but it'll be in your next packet. But I thought I would share with you our year-end total for passengers. We set a new record. We thought we might hit 1.5 million this year. Unfortunately, we're just a little bit short. We're at 1.481605. So another record year, 4.4% over last year, which was also a record year. So you'll see the official numbers come out in the next packet, but just wanted to share that information with you because you're going to start to hear about it as we release our year-end numbers. The media picks up on that, and so I just thought I'd share with you before the media starts running with it. And then the only other thing I just wanted to quickly mention is just today, meeting with Jessica, where'd you go? Oh, Jessica and Mike Smith, our operations manager, met with the contractor who is developing the approaches for the airport. And we had a very good meeting. He has a GPS approach for runway 7 designed, a GPS approach for runway 25 design that actually do mimic our noise contours fairly well. Unfortunately, the more you have turns in an approach as you get closer to the airport, the minimums start to go up. So obviously, if you have a straight in, that's the best, and you can get the best minimums. And then there are 2 different alternative approaches that he also designed that actually do have much better minimums. So that'll be an interesting conversation that we have with the community and with the noise working group to talk about the balance of those approaches. And we don't necessarily have to settle on just one approach. We could have multiple approaches in our toolbox. But I just wanted to let you know we're making progress on that. Unfortunately, just with timing and consultants and other things, it's probably not going to be until March that we daylight those approaches to the noise working group, but look forward to keeping that process moving.
all right. Thank you. Any
Quick
questions?
question. I don't know why I've got feedback. So once that goes to the noise working group in March, what's the timing on that? What's the process for what happens to that?
So in the grand scheme of things, if everything goes very well, the noise working group likes certain approaches and we decide to move forward with them, there will be some community outreach that we have to do just because we are changing something overall for the airport. But even without those requirements, mostly it's on the FAA publication schedule that would be the longer delays. And so I would just say if everything goes really well, the earliest you'll probably see those published is probably 9 months from now, but 9 months to a year for the process.
Do those ever come back to the commission for?
We will definitely be bringing those back to the commission as part of that public process, yes.
Director Hastert, do these new approaches and procedures, will they be published by the government along with all the other government plates that are available to pilots?
Yes, available for anybody to use, public
Anyone.
approaches published by the FAA.
Excellent, excellent.
And then another question on the approaches again. Are we going to get LA Center to issue these approaches?
So the FAA issues the approaches. It's not actually LA Center. They would be giving you the clearances for those approaches if you were flying in and out of here. But coordination has already been occurring with the appropriate air traffic control facilities, LA Center, Tower, approach control.
It's certainly exciting to see so many people taking advantage of the airport and all that convenience. It seems like it's been a little while, at least I don't recall a recent update on the terminal expansion project. Would you have a moment to just kind of give us the highlights?
So we're currently just kind of in that waiting period right now as it goes through some of the environmental reviews. And so we do everything that we can to get to the conceptual point, which we completed. And then everything is kind of turned into the FAA right now for their review. We're hoping to get that back. We're being a little bit conservative by April. It might actually happen sooner, but we're hoping to get that back by April. And then you'll see that project kick back off again. I would be happy to bring back because it's not an agenda item, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I'm happy to bring back an update on that because there is some changes that the city has done in our charter to allow for some alternative procurement methods that I think will help us with this project. So we'll bring back some more information.
Great, thank you. And one other update request, what's the latest with the property right next door? Formerly, at one time known as the Elephant Bar.
So John, I don't know if you have any up-to-the-date information or not.
Unfortunately, we've been a little busy with the flood stuff, so I haven't had a chance to catch up with him on his latest opening. But the last I heard, it was a couple months out, but that was a couple months ago. But I will check in and I'll have Chris send out an email or something that we can
Great.
let you guys know.
On that subject, just curious, were they impacted by the floods?
No, they weren't.
Great. Well, thank you for the update. I think there's a lot of people eager to see that come to fruition. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. Any other questions? Any speaker slips or requests from the public? Nope. Okay. Moving on to the consent calendar, we have the minutes, then we have a specific lease here. Commissioners, do you have anything, questions, clarifications on the consent calendar? Any speakers requests? Nope. All right. Can I get a motion for the consent calendar?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you.
I'll
Can I get a
second.
second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, and then moving on to the recent flood summary. Back to you, Director Hastert.
Give me just 1 second to have Mo help me get this set up. Ready? So I apologize in advance. I had some help to put this slide presentation together. I was out of town last week, so if I turn to my excellent help over to the right, that's the reason why. Mostly John, who put most of this together. So as you know, the flooding issues that we have on the airport aren't local to just the airport and the amount of rainwater that we get dropped onto the airport itself. We have a lot of areas above us in the foothills of watershed that flows to all of the different streams that then flow to the Goleta Slough. So you can see 48 square miles of area drain to the Goleta Slough. And that's where we have the issue, is from that water that comes onto the airport, which I'll get into in just a second. So there's 5 different creeks. They really enter into 2 different locations, kind of the approach end of runway 25 side, which fared better in most of the recent storms and the closures. Although for the January storm this year, there was some significant flooding on Fairview and Hollister in that area. Luckily, it didn't impact the airport side too much. But then on the other side of the airport, kind of central as it comes down towards the location of the control tower, Carneros Creek comes into the center of the airport and then makes a curve to the west and out around the approach end for runway 7 and into the slough. That is the area that impacts us the most and impacted us the most on our most recent closures. So this is a picture of the area. So when you're looking at this, that bridge is Hollister. And there's a box culvert that goes under Hollister that's all concrete. Andrew, how deep would you say this box culvert is?
I would say it's about 8 feet deep.
Yeah, so about 8 feet deep. And you can see it's full up to the top. When this fills up and goes into Carneros Creek, we start to see water that overflows from Carneros Creek around this area right here and onto the airport. So we get a lot of questions, and I provide a lot of feedback to some of the community members who want to know, well, if it's raining, why can't you provide more information as to when the airport's going to close or what the timing is? Honestly, we're at the mercy of all of this water coming our way and debris and other things, which we'll show some of that debris in just a minute. So really, we don't have a good idea of if a storm is going to actually close the airport or not. We can start to predict and guess based on stream flows and things like that. But until the stream actually starts flowing onto the airport out of its banks, that at that point we know we have approximately an hour before shutdown, and that's when things get more realistic as far as timelines go. This was a very bad storm. We actually shut down 2 different times over the holidays, the day after Christmas and then on January 4th. The first shutdown was not nearly as bad. It didn't affect as many buildings. I think John actually has that in the presentation with how many in just a second. The January 4th storm was very bad. I've heard that it was close to the storms that you had here in the 90s that flooded the airport. And so you can see this is our maintenance facility. And even inside of all of the buildings, there was standing water, I'm guessing close to a foot or more. Did you measure it? 18 inches in the building. Significant damage to our maintenance facility, which also houses all of our tools that we use to help out all of the other people that have damage all around the airport, but then other damage all around that area as well. So you can see this is inside of the maintenance facility on the left and in the yard. Also affects our fuel tanks for refilling the vehicles and tractors and other things that we have in fire truck here on the airport. This one, apologize for the water on this. It came from somebody's Ring camera because we didn't have a good picture of this area. But you can see it floods the whole entire area all around, both airside around Atlantic as well as landside Atlantic, and then all of the buildings with the non-aviation businesses as you get closer to Hollister. How it affects the airport and why do we have to close? As that the grass area on the west side of the airport, north of the runway, starts to fill up with water, then it starts to creep onto the runway. And so you can see this is basically looking due west, and that's the water flowing onto the runway. The runway actually acts kind of as a dam, and so it just builds up more and more onto the center line and starts to spread out. We did have a gator pump, which is a large pump. I want to say it's roughly 10,000 gallons a minute, if I'm close on that, to try to get some water from one side of the runway over to the other side that didn't have as much flooding and could drain better. And we actually had even some of our management team, Sarah and Jonathan Abad, were out there manning the gator pump to allow for our crew to get some rest to be able to actually clean up in the morning. But that gator pump is not sufficient to pump out the amount of water that is flowing onto the airport. I think didn't we do a calculation for how much water we thought was coming on versus going off?
Yeah, it was 6 million gallons on the third to the fourth.
Yeah, so about 6 million gallons of water, so 10,000 gallons a minute helps, but it doesn't stop that. So this is the runway center line on that westernmost portion of the main runway. So we did some mitigation measures planning for some of the storms, and some of that was installing the K-rail along Carneros Creek. And you can just see how much water was in that area. It's still flowing through there. So the K-rail probably did help from a debris point of view, but ultimately it went around this whole area and flooded from an area that wasn't even remotely related to the K-rail. So we do think it might have helped with debris. So that helps us to reopen the runway quicker, because once the water recedes off of the runway, then we have to clean up any silt and mud and all of that. And so obviously if we're able to limit some of that, it makes for quicker cleanup. And I can't say enough about our facilities team and their commitment, one, coming out on the holidays, but also just the amount of work that it requires to get the airport back in operation. You'll see some this is the page with the figures of 3 different closures totaling 47 hours total. For the amount of flooding and the amount of damage that was out there, that's miraculous, in my opinion, that we could actually keep the airport operating that quickly with the effort that our facilities team puts in. And the operations team as well for monitoring and helping to get things back inspected. But you can see I mentioned we had one closure actually on Christmas for about 8 hours. The team was able to, there was a break in the storm, the water receded, we were able to reopen again, but then had to close again at 4:05 actually the next day. That was one of the days that I came out here, and so a lot of we get some negative feedback, whether it be on social media or just people in the community that just really don't understand, well, it stopped raining. So why is the airport closed? It's not raining anymore. So I can tell you from that closure at 4:05, the water did not stop coming onto the airport until about 3:05 the next morning, coming from those streams. So that's really what we're waiting for, is for that water to stop coming onto the airport and then start to recede. There's a lot of factors that play into that with tides and other things, because some of our outlets may be underwater. Ultimately, the tides, I don't think, had a major impact this time. It might have slowed it down at certain periods, but it was really just the amount of water that was on the airport. So that was the longer closure on January 3rd and 4th. 22 hours total. If you remember back to January of 2023, we were closed for about 24 hours, and I will say that this was much worse than that one. So our team is definitely getting better at responding. And then some of the preventative measures that Andrew and his facilities team put in place, I think, do help with some of that debris as well. So on the left, you can see that's the outfall from the gator pump, trying to pump it across. And you can see from further out towards UCSB, I don't think that's an ops vehicle maybe, out on the runway, and you can see the extent of the water on the approach into the runway. That's why it does not allow for a safe condition for either general aviation or airlines to come in and land, forcing us to close it to fixed wing airplanes. So just want to let you know, we do a lot of outreach. We've learned a lot through the past few years about some of these flooding events. So we have a system called Everbridge that allows us to communicate with our airport staff as well as tenants on the airport. So we put out flood watches. We put out that notice that I mentioned when the water starts coming onto the airport that it's likely will close in an hour. That goes out to all of our stakeholders, and we continue to monitor the weather. We do also provide weather briefings to them that we receive, just so they have an understanding of, this is a storm that is likely to be able to flood us. We can't guarantee whether it's going to flood or not until we see how the actual storm works out. Obviously, we hope for the best. And then we coordinate with all of those agencies, including Air Traffic Control Tower, because their area actually gets very flooded as well. And I don't know if we did it during this storm, but last storm we actually had to ferry them back and forth to the tower with the ARF vehicle to get them in and out of their workplace. So this is some of the tenant buildings. Or actually, this one might be our storage one.
No, this is Atlantic Shop.
Oh, sorry. This is the Atlantic Shop. I'm not familiar with all the building numbers. I know addresses a little better. So this is the Atlantic Shop.
That one's.
Yeah, I'm going to pass it off to you for just a minute, John, since you know these buildings better than I do.
So 314. So both 314 and 315 are the buildings on Arnold. These two buildings probably get the brunt of all of the floodwaters that come down it. You can see that's probably 3 inches of mud up against the building there, and then probably about an inch or so of water inside the building. 315, same thing. So about an inch of water and some mud as well. 315 is a tenant occupied building. So he did get it cleaned up, and I'm working with him on the whole mitigation process for getting the flood cuts and stuff done in that building. So as Chris mentioned, so we had 4 buildings impacted for the December storm. And then I came out the day after Christmas and did a quick site walk with it, and there was only 4 buildings affected. And then the January storm came, and we had 13 buildings affected. Same 4 from December plus additional. Right now, as far as cleaning and mitigation goes, I'm up to $1.6 million in just cleaning and mitigation. That does not include the reconstruction costs. We are engaged with the city's insurance on all of the damages and stuff like that. So we're working through that process to get it fixed as fast as possible, get it up so we can get the tenants back in and start receiving revenue again from those tenants. I will try to talk dredging. If not, I'm gonna have one of these two do it. I'll just let you guys do it. It's easier.
I cover it in my next presentation.
Oh,
Let me just cover that one.
sure. Somebody will cover it.
So they're going to talk about more of the stream and dredging and other things, but I will just say that after the first initial storm when we closed, there was a lot of debris that came down with that, and so the city moved forward with an emergency dredging operation. Unfortunately, there was just not enough time between the storms, so you'll see some of that effort still going on out there. We were actually very fortunate to be able to work with the County of Santa Barbara. They had a team already out there, and we were able to piggyback on that contract with an emergency contract. So we do try to make efforts to counteract some of the things as they are coming in. Unfortunately, this was just one storm followed by another one too quickly, so there was just too much debris that was out there. I'm not going to play this whole long clip, but you can kind of see what the dredging operation is. It's very difficult to get out there, and it's already still full of water, so it's a slow moving operation. This is still that box culvert again that we discussed. So the picture on the right is that earlier picture where you saw the water. It should be about 8 foot deep with no debris in there, but you can see the right side is full almost all the way to the top with the debris. That's not water, that's actually debris that's in there, silt and other things. And then the picture on the left is if you just crossed over that bridge and took another picture, that's what that picture is. So you can see even upstream of that, it's just full of debris. Some of that emergency work on Carneros Creek that is continuing. And that's the presentation on the flood and the damage. I do want to give credit. We have a new risk manager with the city, and he has been amazing to work with. I think it was his first week on the job when all of this happened. And he's been just amazing to work with John and Andrew on their teams to bring the insurance company in, basically bless all of the work that we're doing as an emergency to get the area cleaned up and still be something that we can recover from insurance, hopefully. But just been amazing to work with. And then also with our own team, working with facilities to get the runway reopened. That was, I don't want to say the easy part, that was the quick part. But the cleanup is continuing, and having their own facilities affected as well, definitely it's not good for making those efforts go quickly. So I'm very proud of the team that we have and the ability to get the airport operational, but then also work with our tenants. Then I just want to say we have some of the most amazing tenants who have been very patient and very helpful. And so John's job could be much more difficult if they express the frustration that they probably have, but they've been very good to work with. So as bad as all of this looks and as much damage is out there, it really is a lot of different teams coming together and working together to get us back to normal, which will take probably 4 months to 6 months with the full restoration. And with that, if you have any questions, happy to answer them or our team.
Well, first of all, I think you've been a little modest when talking about this because you became a pretty good pump operator as well yourself. So the community thanks you for your efforts, especially over a holiday. So thank you to all of you guys. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Go, Paul.
One observation on your comment about being the worst storm since the 90s. I have been monitoring the effects of storms on this airport since the 80s, and I live right next to a creek. The water level in that creek was the highest I've ever seen since 1989. We had a heck of a storm.
Topaz?
I was just gonna say, in the future, can any badge holders or anyone on the airfield be at any assistance for an emergency, something like this?
So I will say in this case, I mean, extra hands are always helpful in some way or another, but for getting the airport open again, it's really just a very frustrating wait for that water to recede off the airport. So there's not anything that extra hands could do. I volunteered and Sarah and Jonathan to come out and help just to keep a crew from wasting their time sitting on a pump.
Right.
But honestly, we were fully staffed here at the airport. We have a good team. I don't think we were short on people.
Okay.
So I appreciate, the potential offer or assistance.
Just a thought.
But it's really at some point it becomes almost a liability to have more people out there because the mud is very slippery and we want to have the professionals that have insurance and all of that, the ones to be working out there.
Very true, thank you.
I had a question about this, I think you called it gator pump. It's hard to imagine what something that can pump 10,000 gallons a minute looks like. Is it like the size of a car? Do you all own it? How much do they cost? Do you have a backup?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Miller, we only have the one. It attaches to the back of our John Deere tractor. Its power takeoff device. Picture it looks a lot like a flatbed trailer with this massive an 18-inch pipe that runs along the side of it. It has an impeller on the back that is spun by the power takeoff drive from the tractor. Sucks in the water, runs it through that pipe, and then out a vinyl hose that we have about 250 feet of length that we can use. We typically just have 50-foot length on it, so we can expand it if we need to.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. And so you own one of them, and are they tremendously expensive? Do you have a backup?
They're pretty expensive. I think it's an $80,000 piece of equipment. The county of Santa Barbara also owns one, but it's been our assumption that anytime we'd want to use it, they'd also need to use it as well for other operations.
Is that something that's worth budgeting another one at some point, or?
I think if we were to increase the capacity to pump, we would want to be looking at physical facilities so that we could then move considerably more water at one time. So you might think of something like a levee pump in New Orleans, for example.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That is some of what you'll probably hear more about
I was wondering
in just a minute as well.
Next.
Vice Chair Maya?
You mentioned Everbridge provides some communication to the community. Is that something that other stakeholders can get on that distribution as well?
So we keep the list fairly relevant to the airport itself and the stakeholders. But I would imagine if you're a tie-down tenant or something, we could probably create a group. So if there's something that impacts those tenants, we could add them on if that's what you're asking for. But we do have the ability to add more people.
Yeah, I've been asked by other pilots and other people with interests at the airport. How do we know? How can we know what's going on at the airport?
If they're a genuine tenant on the airport with
Yeah.
a vested interest, we have different groups that we assign. We don't send out a broadcast for every single thing that happens to every single person on the Everbridge, but there's room to create a like a T-hanger and tie-down group, and if there's something that's affecting them, be able to send the appropriate messages.
In years past, or in presentations past over the last year or two, with various storms, you've talked about an inflatable dam. Is that something that we'll talk more about?
So we did actually deploy the brand, I think it is Tiger Dam, and so we did have those all along the ditch along Firestone, and they I don't know if you want to speak to it a little bit, Andrew. They did their job until they couldn't.
Yeah, that's an excellent summary, Director Hastert. Thank you. The Tiger Dam product is able to hold back about a foot of water. When they're overtopped, they are also undermined, and so they end up splitting open in places. We had some lessons learned in November and again in December about how better to anchor them. What we found was that our initial efforts to drop the anchors into the dirt was a considerable effort until it started raining, and then when that dirt is mud, the anchors became a lot looser. So we'll be looking at in-pavement anchoring solutions as an alternative so that we can minimize that risk and try to keep them in place.
And then my final question, two-part question. What criteria is used to determine when the airport needs to be closed and the timing of that, and who makes that ultimately makes that call?
So ultimately, operations makes that call. They're required to do our runway inspections and conditions of the whole airport. And so they're monitoring all of the safety areas off of the airport and whether conditions are safe for an airplane to come and go. So we can have conditions that are not ideal and continue to operate, but definitely as soon as the water starts getting onto the runway and creates potential hydroplaning and other issues, then we have no alternative but to shut down. But that's a call made by operations.
And that's done anytime, day or night, when you have a situation like this. You're constantly monitoring it, even when the tower's closed and
Yes,
everybody's in bed. Yeah.
We have personnel here in our security and operations center 24 hours a day, every day.
Great, thanks.
Steve?
Yeah.
The airport never closes. That's why.
A couple of questions. First of all, one of them is, will the any proposed development that's happening through the FBO areas, will that have a beneficial impact on any of this? Will that be included? I mean, is there any, does that change any of this, I guess is the question.
So I guess I'll just answer that vaguely to say that all development on the airport will have an impact. So if we create more hardscape that has the potential to have more water runoff that hurts things. If we do, say, a taxiway project and it's well designed to where we maybe have some retention areas or other things that could improve things. So every project that we do here needs to be evaluated for that impact. I will say that it's very difficult to develop on the airport because we're in the floodway and floodplain, and so that requires new stuff to be built at a higher elevation so that it doesn't get flooded. But ultimately, everything does have some form of an impact, some of it negative.
Okay. And then the final one, more of a comment of great job to the staff. I mean, I think that what happened, I mean, this, I think your comment is a good one, that this was an incredible storm. And so you guys did a terrific job. And John, shout out to you. There's nothing will turn a bad tenant into, or a good tenant into a bad tenant like the property manager. So if your tenants are still doing okay, you're doing a great job. So nicely done. With that, is there any opportunity to kind of get an article into the press about kind of what we just talked about? I mean, the fact that I mean, this is a good story, and people don't understand that the reason the airport floods is because of all the drainage. I mean, there's just a good education. And
So there was one article that I'm trying to remember if it was the Independent or Newshawk now.
Newshawk had one,
Newshawk.
but it was much more of the airport's flooded. But it hasn't been a follow-up article of.
I don't know if it's the same one or not. They
Oh,
did
okay.
a follow-up where they did mention our drainage master plan, the sea level rise adaptation. They even published that we were going to have the meeting tonight if anybody's interested. So there was a follow-up. I'm not sure if you saw that one or not.
Sorry, I just said you guys did a good job, and it would be really helpful for the public to understand, so you don't get the calls if the rain stopped. Why isn't the airport open? So,
Thank you.
Just a comment.
Completely agree. Just a couple quick questions. Regarding the flood insurance, I'm assuming this is all flood zone for everything that's south of Hollister, designated flood zone. Do we know at this point if any of the contents for some of our tenants are covered by our policies, or is it on them to have their own specific flood policy?
So I asked that specific question, and it looks like it's going to be under their insurance for
Okay.
their contents, but for ours, it's for city properties on the cities.
Okay. And then I know some of the other commissioners talked about the dredging, and I know we spent a significant amount of money last year on dredging. Clearly, we have to do more of that. Is that something that's covered under our policies, or is that something that we need to start budgeting for on an annual basis, because this is going to keep on happening and we're going to continue to have some of these issues, and it's going to be a pretty large budget item going forward?
So that's a much larger question to answer. I think we should go through the next presentation first, and then we can answer some of those same questions, because it's very much related. But there's definitely work that needs to happen out there.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you. This is a question, your insurance question, actually. So the city is self-insured, and so my question is that we've had a couple of storms like this, and there's projected to be more, as we're going to probably learn in the next item. How's that affecting our insurance rates and our ability to get flood insurance?
So that's probably a better question for Greg, our new risk manager. But I will say that even though the city is self-insured, we do still have several insurance policies. So this isn't going through our self-insurance program. This is through one of our actual policies that we have. And how it affects rates, that's a question more for Greg than I could answer.
So maybe that's something in a future presentation as you're looking at this, because I think depending on where the rates go, it could be a very big hit. I know in the harbor there's a lot of with the insurance and the deductibles that have to come up, and it might even need to be general fund subsidized at some point related to the wharf, and we have critical infrastructure. So as we're looking at other items on this, maybe that's something that could come back as part of another item, not on its own, but just part of another item.
Thank you. Councilmember Freeman, we're happy to bring back more information. John and I are actually learning a lot from Greg right now, our new risk manager. And I will say we are very fortunate. We have a decent insurance policy that does not have the deductibles like Stearns Wharf does. But as you mentioned, if we continue to have issues, then it potentially could grow.
Thank you.
Any follow-up questions? All right, we do have one speaker on this topic. Ernesto?
Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Again, my name is Ernesto Paredes. I'm the executive director of Easy Lift Transportation. I've been with them for about a little over 30 years, and our offices have been on this property since about 2003. I think our first spot was on Cass Place, and then on Cook a couple times, and now we are on Francis Patel Road. And we've experienced not only a lot of fires and floods, mudslides, but I came here for a reason, to tell you how great a job Andrew and John's team and all of you guys are doing. It's unbelievable. I mean, again, it's such hard work. When we looked at the mud just on one parking spot, I thought it would take us all day just to get the mud out of that parking spot, much less everything that you have to do. The day of when we did to shut down, the facilities crew had to save a couple of our dispatchers because their car was underwater, essentially. Not completely, but they couldn't drive. And so it took them to higher ground where we were able to take them back to their homes. So always appreciate that. That was amazing. John has been unbelievable in not only dealing with us as things were happening, but to relocate us where we are. I We are open every single day. People need transportation every single day, specialized transportation. And we have not shut down and had any reason to shut down because of the teamwork that we've had, not only on our team, but your team too. So that's been unbelievable. You see the vans out here. I can't tell you how we much appreciate. I know they may not be the most beautiful things to have, but for us and to have our community members able to be transported every single day through those vans, and because we could be here, it gives us an opportunity to really continue and serve this community as well as we can. But we couldn't have done it, we can't do it without your partnership. I know it's not always popular to like open it up, it's not raining and all the things you're talking about. I get it. I know that why we can't open and all those things. And I apologize for all the arrows you must all receive during these times from the public who just don't know yet. But being in transportation, I'm always also very aware. You guys are all on time before this meeting. You guys before 6 o'clock, and you guys are already in your seats. It's pretty impressive. I've been on a lot of boards. That doesn't happen all the time. So it just shows you how serious you all take your jobs. And again, I just come here from one small tenant on your property and just so appreciative of your team and all the things. We will continue to work. And as soon as we can, we want to come back onto our spot. So that's all I have to say. But thank you again very much for any question you have, anything. Otherwise, thanks again for everything you all do. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the positive feedback. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, no motion on this one. We'll move on to item number 10. Back to you, Director Hastert.
Thank you, Chair Glazer. I'm going to pass it to our airport planner, Jessica Metzger.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Jessica Metzger, Airport Planner. So yes, the airport floods. But we have known that for a while. And so just to give you a quick background reminder, in 2022, we received 2 separate grants from the Coastal Commission to start our Santa Barbara Airport Climate Adaptation Plan. We also put in our own money from our funds as an airport to do this climate adaptation plan. So our purpose here today is to present to you kind of an update of where we are in this project and show you some options that we have for adaptation measures, and then the ones that we chose as engineering staff, as well as operations and facilities and other divisions of the airport on the preferred adaptation measures. And then look for general input both from board or commission members as well as the public that's here today. So to start out with the time frames, this is what was presented to you during the last part of our CAP. So we have 3 different time frames for our CAP: near term, which is 5 to 25 years, midterm, which is 25 to 50, and long term, which is 50 to 65 years. As you heard in the last presentation, the intense precipitation is occurring more frequently, and that is what is causing the flooding to happen more often at the airport. We're also looking at adding on to the scope that was the near, mid, and long term for the CAP, and going to talk about our ongoing efforts and planned efforts and our immediate next steps, which we're either doing currently or hoping to embark on in the next 5 years. So for our adaptation plan framework, we're looking at the flooding frequency threshold, which has already been reached, as we talked about in the last presentation, and really moving forward from there into really implementing some of the plans that have already taken place at the airport. Our goals are really to reduce that flooding frequency, and in the next slides, we'll go into that more in depth with what we're doing on the ground. This is just a picture that shows some of the historical flooding that we have. We created this PowerPoint before the holidays, so our last two storms aren't on here, but you got a good taste of that before. And so this has been a problem. We heard from our commissioner that the creek was higher than he'd ever seen it before. It's just continuing to be a problem. Last year we had an off year where we didn't have any flooding, but we can anticipate with the modeling it's happening more and more frequently. So looking at this here, this is kind of your doom and gloom map. This is tidal inundation in the longest term that we're looking at in the plan. So looking out 50 to 65 years with the airport being completely inoperable if we do nothing. But that's not going to happen because we're already doing things on the ground, and we're going to continue to do things through this plan and other plans that you'll hear about. So right now for our ongoing efforts, we have the county flood control management of those basins. We also have the Carneros K-Rail project that you saw pictures of as well. There's a picture of that Tiger Dam that we spoke about in the previous presentation in the orange there. And we're also in process. We started in February of 2025 working on the Carneros Creek Maintenance Dredging Plan. So that is a project that has a multiple layered permit process. We hired Dudek Consulting to be our consultant on that, and we'll be ready to put our plans in for permit in March or April of this year for that continued maintenance of Carneros Creek, as well as doing the dredging that we spoke about earlier happening right now on the ground. And then we also have storm drain improvements. So this is really important for us to remember as we plan for these disasters that occur. When we finish plans, we have to make sure to implement them. So our drainage master plan was completed in 2024 and lays out measures that we should be working towards to be one of those that alleviates our flooding. And so that should be front of mind. Our ongoing and planned adaptation measures also include some other projects in the pipeline that can help with resiliency. On the left side of your screen, you'll see the Taxiway B extension. Part of Taxiway B's extension will be creating mitigation areas for the new taxiway hard surface around it, which could include areas to be flood detention basins in this specific northwest quadrant that's been having so many issues in our most recent flooding. Additionally, on the right side of the slide is a project that UCSB recently had funded. It's to restore tidal flow to the area in the yellow polygon. Although that is outside the city of Santa Barbara limits, it is connecting directly with the Goleta Slough, so would change the water patterns in flooding as well. And then additionally, another grant was given by the Coastal Conservancy to looking at the larger Goleta Slough network. So if you remember that first slide on Director Hastritt's presentation that showed that watershed area, that would be studying kind of the larger area there, how all of our different jurisdictions interconnect in the Goleta Slough, and looking at kind of big picture solutions to that instead of project by project, which this is going to go through. And so now I'll hand it over to Amber Ings. She is our consultant with ESA, and she'll give you the technical measures that we have in place. It's just that one.
Thank you, Jessica. Good evening, everyone. All right, let's get into it. So a lot of these slides, you don't have to read all the text, but I'm going to give you what I can as a technical overview of each of these adaptation measures that we've come up with over the past year. We have two different groups of measures. One is for the Goleta Slough and creeks, and then the other side is for the AOA areas. We wanted to separate them out because one is more infrastructure, and then the other one is more restoration and multi-benefit adaptation measures. Okay, so we're gonna first start with the Goleta Slough areas. And the first one we're bringing up is the berm on the south of the channel. So if you remember, that same area in yellow is where the temporary K-rail is presently. And the opportunity here is to replace that K-rail with a permanent berm that would be vegetated, so you'd enhance habitat, and it would aid in the prevention of runway flooding. And as Director Haster was talking about the debris that would be coming over the bank of the Carneros Creek there. And there's constraints like every one of the measures I'm going to discuss. It may increase flooding off site when you put in a barrier, and it could conflict with the taxiway B extension. Next one is to restore the Carneros Creek floodplain and expand the channel. So if you look on the left here in the channel, I have in pink, and then the potential floodplain general area in yellow above it. So on the right side of that, you have a maintenance yard, and then there's another building on the left side and Tecolotito Creek. And there's opportunity there to expand, kind of expanding the channel and floodplain, so you create floodplain storage area. So it's a place for floodwaters to extend in there, therefore lowering floodwaters in other regions, and more storage for debris. There's constraints as well. Portions are mitigated in the past, so you'd have to pass over those barriers for permitting. And like all of the measures I'll talk about, a feasibility assessment is necessary, and hydraulic modeling would be needed. Next one is a detention basin in the same location. So a detention basin is a bit different than floodplain restoration, and it would be a kind of a storage location where you would keep the berm on the bank, and so it would act just as storage, and you might have a pump or some kind of offlet channel. And so this one would also enhance floodplain retention here and the Reynolds wetland area. And this one may be needed to coordinate it as well with the taxiway B extension. Okay, this is a figure that shows connectivity currently as far as we know it. So I'm gonna just kind of briefly go through it. The area in blue is currently tidally connected. The area in green is not tidally connected. And so why is that important? That's important because there's kind of like a conveyance and storage that's in each of these locations. And if it's blocked off from the creek, from the slough, then you have less storage in those regions. So there's a couple adaptation measures I'll talk about with kind of changing that up. So along Goleta Slough Channel, there's a remnant levee. When they dredge the channel, they kind of push the sediment up on the banks. So one of the adaptation measures is to remove or breach the levee in locations. Oh, I don't know. Oh, man. Okay, I'll try to be a bit more descriptive in the areas. So, and if you have any questions that I'm not describing well what I'm going on. Yeah, sure. Okay, all right. So the area in green that's circled by the yellow line is a possibility for expansion of floodwater conveyance due to either the removal or breach in the levee. And this would increase flood conveyance, lowering the flood levels and duration in the AOA area. And this also could restore berm tidal areas per the Goleta Slough Sea Level Rise and Management Plan, enhancing habitat. There's constraints here like the others. There's potential prior mitigation constraints. And there's also just the need for feasibility. Thin layer deposition. So this is a relatively new measure that's been used in the Gulf Coast, and there's also a project in Seal Beach that is using it as a pilot. So the measure here, the opportunity is for channel maintenance dredging. And so you would reduce the flooding by increasing flood conveyance by removing the sediment. And then you could place the sediment on top of the marsh, aiding in marsh accretion, trying to keep ahead of sea level rise. And so there's constraints here. It's a new technique, but like I said, it was implemented as a pilot project in Seal Beach wetlands, been successful there. Let's go all the way down to the Goleta slough mouth. So as you saw, Jessica explained, with sea level rise, there's going to be a potential for more tidal inundation around the airport properties. And, you know, in the past, there's been management of the beach berm in order to lower the water levels in the slough before a storm event, because the elevation of the berm determines the water level to an extent until it breaches. So this opportunity is to grade the beach berm lower without breaching it, so it would breach sooner. So you're lowering the elevation of that berm. And this has been permitted and performed in Ormond Lagoon, Oxnard, and so many other locations. The Goleta slough mouth was also previously permitted. I think it was a temporary measure, and they used to breach it. But this being priming it could be a measure that would be easier to permit. Okay, this is a fun one, a siphon. So there's an opportunity here to place a pipe culvert from the lagoon mouth out to the ocean along the pier. And what it would do is you would be, it's by suction. I don't think it could also be by pump, but the water would flow from the lagoon mouth to the ocean, therefore lowering the water elevation in the lagoon. So it's almost similar to priming. The purpose is to lower the water level in the lagoon. And the siphon would sit close or at the bottom of the lagoon. So you'd be sequestering water out of the lagoon at the lower elevations. So there's a benefit for water quality as well, and it could benefit flood management. And you could attach it to the Goleta pier. But there's maintenance involved. It could be expensive. I have another, I didn't have another slide about that, but I wanted to tell you all that this has been implemented on the San Lorenzo River. We had a similar one there. Okay, next we're going to go over to San Pedro Creek. We saw that there was recent flooding there that caused, it was 3 inches of sediment along buildings 314 and 315. There's a couple opportunities here. One is to put in a stormwater detention basin north of Hollister, and that would be close to that long-term parking lot. And another option is to have a raised bank or berm along San Pedro Creek south, closer to the hangars on the airport property. And so these both would increase flood storage and potentially lower flood levels downstream of Hollister and upstream. But there's cultural resources constraints. We know that area where I have the detention basin north of there and the golf course property, there's cultural resources there. And San Pedro has steelhead habitat. And like the others, also need hydraulic modeling. Okay, now we're going to go. Are you all still with me? Are we all right? We could do it. All right, so now we're going to go through to do the AOA adaptation measures. And we had Mead and Hunt, the consultant team, help us with these. So first one I'll discuss is the Firestone drainage channel, flood management. And there's kind of like a slurry of different methods you could use here. One is clearing the channel. So you all saw how much sediment gets blocked up in the channel. So if you remove sediment and you remove, if you clear channels, you're creating more flood capacity. And so an option there is to clear the channel if possible. Another option is to raise Firestone Road. The Tiger Dam is partially doing this to a foot, but you could raise the road itself. And then another option is to have a detention facility at the end of runway 15. And you could put a detention basin here, and it would go along with maybe a pump system, channel conveyance, and so forth. But there has been prior mitigation of Firestone drainage channel, so we'd have to go over that bridge as well. And the depth to groundwater in this location, though we don't have specific borings yet, it's known that the groundwater table is shallow here. And of course, there's FAA requirements for all of these AOA measures. There's the FAA requirements that will have to meet the slope requirements, safety area requirements, grading, and drainage for the bird strike. The next one is groundwater management. Like I said, the groundwater table is shallow. It is projected to become shallower. So an opportunity here is for dewatering and raising grades in the lower areas, so adding fill. And of course, there's constraints, groundwater assessments, and so forth. The next one is, and I'll go a few slides for this one, is storm drainage improvements. So an option here is to convert the storm drain networks that are there currently to a pumped system. And this would reduce on-site flooding by improving stormwater conveyance on-site. Another option here is detention galleries under a non-airfield pavement. And challenges we have because of the high groundwater table. Okay, so there's 4 proposed pump station locations. They're in red. Each of the colored lines are different pump station networks. So for example, all of the green lines would pump into the node on the bottom left, the red one. And then the pink lines would drain into the node in the middle there, and then the dark green and the aqua. The aqua would go to the southern pump station there, and the water would be pumped into Goleta Slough directly. Okay, so this is the first location, and for all of these I have that the purpose of the pumps would be to reduce the flooding on airfield pavements. Like we know that there's that pump that does temporarily, but these would be permanent pump systems, so hopefully you all wouldn't have to stand out there after any events. Maybe a maintenance or two, but that's the first location. The second location is a smaller network. But this one, actually the pink one's quite a big network, and it would reduce flooding from the general aviation area as well as the runways. Stormwater pump location 3 reduces flooding from just the airfield pavements there. That's a smaller network. And then the fourth one would reduce flooding for airfield pavements and the terminal apron. Next adaptation measure, we have a couple more, is an opportunity for utility upgrades. One of the options is to flood-proof electrical conduits, an inflow and infiltration study, and to do an inventory of the pipe material and corrosion risk assessment. And then we have flood-proofing measures. So this is a measure that is used in one of the buildings in the general aviation area. That's the picture on the bottom left, that short wall. But the opportunity here is to flood-proof buildings with temporary barriers or permanent barriers. They have, in the top 2 pictures, this is a wall that actually comes out of the ground during a storm event. And that the picture on the top left is when it's kind of coming out and forming, and then it becomes this big wall. And that one's in use in the Northeast. I think it's in New York. And then the bottom right is a hydraulic wall. So, and then other measures within buildings to raise sensitive equipment, add storage racks, of course. And constraints we have here, you know, hangars and other infrastructures need to be at ground level. You have the FAA requirements. And also just to understand, like anything that you're going to put in that's floodproofing is displacing floodwaters elsewhere. So it requires FEMA assessments and just an understanding of where floodwaters are going. You know, they would be and could be going off-site to the city of Goleta and other areas. Okay, airfield modifications, which is kind of talked about earlier, raising runways. So this one is to modify or improve the existing airfield, making the pavement resilient to flooding, an incremental pavement lift and grading. And a couple of the first ones we're looking at is raising runway 15R and raising the taxiway Charlie, which is the one that runs left to right there on the top by runway 15. Of course, there's FAA requirements. And like I said before, raising the airfield could increase flooding elsewhere, or could significantly increase it elsewhere. You know that it would increase. All right, so then we have a couple more slides to talk about midterm and long term, although we did focus on the near term because there's an immediate need. In the midterm, well, go back. During the near term, we're going to reassess the conditions and improvements made during the near term to refine the midterm plan, of course. And then in the Goleta Slough, a couple of the midterm options are exploring upstream flood detention to detain the floodwaters before they get onto the airfield in coordination with other jurisdictions. And then for AOA actions, there's modifying the existing airfield by incremental pavement lift and grading. And then here's just a schematic of what it means to incrementally lift the runway and how much engineering there is behind that, how many FAA requirements of the slopes that are needed. And so it's no small task, and of course it's expensive and all of that. So potentially increased flooding elsewhere, the FAA requirements may need to reconstruct the main runway, and there would need to be a replacement of utilities. In the long term, we'll reassess conditions and the midterm improvements and refine the long-term plan, of course. And then we'll consider for the long term the costs and impacts of protecting the airport in place, a regional levee and flood control channel system, elevating airport infrastructure, other regional air service solutions, and lastly, relocating the airport. And there's the next step. So I'm going to give it back to Jessica.
Thank you, Amber. So these are our next steps. Number 2, estimating preliminary costs for the 3 selected adaptation measures is one that we already have funding for and we're going to be moving forward with. Number 1, the feasibility and effectiveness of the adaptation measures was kind of came to be because when we started this process and started gathering all of the data needed to look at adaptation measures, we realized that we do not have the information necessary to do true hydrologic modeling of the airport area. And so that is something that is not in the scope of this climate adaptation plan, but something that's definitely needed into the future. And so as an engineering team, we're looking for grant opportunities to move forward on that. And then we'll also be implementing the drainage master plan, which I spoke about earlier. So our engineering team, along with the other divisions, came up with these measures for costing. We're looking at the permanent berm to replace the K-rail along Carneros Creek. We're looking at restoring the floodplain habitat north of Carneros and potentially expanding the creek itself. And then we're also looking at costing the construction of the Firestone stormwater detention facility at the end of runway 15R. So our next steps in this process will be doing this presentation to our sustainability committee. That committee was formed roughly around 6 years ago, I believe, when it was more in 2015 when we finalized our climate adaptation planning and sea level rise process for the city proper downtown. And then we started out a whole department on sustainability and resilience. And so that's kind of their airport commission. And then we'll be completing the phase 2 of the CAP. So finalizing these adaptation measures, finalizing those cost estimates. And once we have that administrative draft of the plan, we'll be doing outreach to the public. We'll come back to this commission, the planning commission, the sustainability committee, as well as hold a public workshop on what our approach for the future of climate adaptation plan in the airport is. And so with that, I think, so just one more, our future steps that we have identified through this process, some of which I've spoken about already, are shown here on this slide. But one that we haven't really talked about is once we get this modeling completed for the airport, we need to make sure that we follow it up with constant monitoring of the trends that we have in our airport so we can continue to gather data. We don't have a lot of monitoring right now, and that's something that we want to make sure we change. So thank you very much. I'm Jessica Metzger. I work at the airport, but I was also helped immensely in this process by Brad Cleansing, and he's out right now on paternity leave, but he'll be back the next time we're in front of you. Amber has been great on our ESA team, and she's joined by Nick Garrity, Andy Roberts, and Bip Pardons. And then we also have our Meet and Hunt team. Some of these names you guys have seen before. They worked on our drainage master plan, so that was a nice dovetailing to get them onto this team as well. And we're happy to answer any questions. Amber will take the technical ones. Thank you.
Commissioners, Paul.
Yes, thank you for a great presentation, both of you. I'm quite sure that on the issues of water, you're doing great, so I'm not going to question that. But as a pilot, one of the things we're always concerned about is bird strikes. So the question that I'm posing, that I haven't seen anything in this, when you're creating or reestablishing wetlands, how is that going to affect our airport for the number of birds that we are going to have on property?
I could take this one. So from what we understand from the bird strike is that the waterfowl that are more likely to be bird strikes are the ones from freshwater wetlands and not from saltwater. So that's one thing. And then, so we're not as concerned with the tidal wetland restoration, but we would be very concerned about detention basins or any standing freshwater that could be there longer than, I believe it's 48 hours, right? Is that the FAA requirement? So we would need to have the detention basins drained within 48 hours to meet that requirement for bird strikes.
Okay, thank you very much.
And we also have done studies on that in the recent past in the airport on the bird strikes and the wetlands and what types and species of birds. So we have data on that also.
And separate to this whole exercise, we did a wildlife hazard assessment, which then turned into a wildlife hazard mitigation plan. And so obviously those documents would have to be updated as well with any changes to wildlife around the airport. And so operations also has things that they can do to mitigate if there are birds showing up in areas they shouldn't be, things like that. And so we would have to adapt those plans.
Vice Chair Maya.
You mentioned earlier in the presentation about some work being done by UCSB and adjacent property. Is there any concern with effects on airport property with what they're doing, and how closely are you coordinating with the university and state project team there?
Yes, thank you for that question, Commissioner. We are very lucky at the airport because we were instrumental in starting the Goleta Slough Management Committee, and we actually fund that committee still out of our airport operations budget. And that gathers all of the jurisdictions together that are part of the Goleta Slough, all the NGOs that have an interest in the Goleta Slough, including the university, the city of Goleta, the county, the Audubon Society, Vector Control. It's a large group. Our list is about 210 people. So we meet every other month, and we have newsletters on updates every month to keep each other apprised of where we are in our projects. And just anecdotally, over the past 4 months, I've given presentations with people from that group on climate change at least 5 times. So we're all working very closely together.
Thanks.
Other questions? Mr. Howden?
So I'm curious where the Coastal Commission comes in on this, all the mitigation. Are we looking at some flexibility? Are they into adaptation with our concerns? Are they a source of funding? How does that work?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Houghton. So the funding for this project actually came 2/3 of it from the Coastal Commission. And thank you for that question, because you brought up something I didn't really touch on that much, is that we got that funding because out of this plan, we're developing policies that go into our local coastal program for the airport, which is a specific document that governs development in the certain coastal area. Doesn't go across the street on Hollister, but from here to the water and UCSB, basically. And so the Coastal Commission put out these grants for the statewide because people weren't updating their local coastal programs, and they wanted to incentivize that. And so as part of this plan, Amber and I have also been working concurrently with developing those policies based on the adaptation measures. And so we meet with them about every couple months too, to give them updates.
Thank you.
Other questions? Just looking at this, how specifically the Carneros Creek upgrades with the detention basin, it seems like the issue that we had in this most recent storm is we had 6 million gallons of water from one side of the runway that needed to get to the other side of the runway. Would these detention basins factor in that, and would there be some sort of a, what happens is, you know, Paul's Creek overflows and it's 8 million the next time we have this? Are we then running the risk of, with these berms and these detention basins, then flooding Hollister and creating our liability on the other side of Hollister, or how do you guys think about that?
Well, there's absolutely a need for further feasibility assessments and modeling, but I could say just from engineering know-how, yes, there would be effects to other areas. However, it depends on how you construct it. So if you were to make a floodplain area so that you'd be creating storage, you'd actually lower the floodwaters elsewhere, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of opening it up. But if you do something like just a detention and there's a berm involved and you're closing off floodwaters from other places, then you're potentially making an issue. That's right. Yeah.
So high tide would be potentially a dangerous time for us and that kind of thing.
Eventually it could be an issue, but with I think concurrent adaptation measures for the Goleta Slough, you could create something that could work here.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was curious how much of this adaptation or mitigation work might potentially be eligible for FAA grants.
So there's a lot of funding sources that are available for disaster mitigation, all of that. The federal grants that we receive through the Airport Improvement Project, probably not as applicable to these. However, if it is something that's undermining, you know, areas of the runway or something that we could look into, that the problem is we only get a certain portion of funds every year as entitlement funds, and that's not nearly enough to cover a lot of this work that needs to happen.
But there are potentially other federal funds.
Yes.
available. Thank you.
Bowden?
I'm thinking out loud here, but I'm looking for the silver lining. Maybe, although I am delighted to see that we're blowing up dams on the Klamath River and various other streams that have been dammed. But perhaps we should be bringing in the Army Corps of Engineers and looking at a reservoir on this side of the San Ynez Mountains, although that would be very unpopular locally, but it's a waste to lose all this water. And it seems like there may be some area of open space. Not happy to even bring it up, but it seems that that could be a solution. You have 5 streams emptying into the Goleta Slough. Seems like a ditch running along perpendicular to those 5 streams into a reservoir out towards El Capitan Canyon or something might be able to save some of that water and divert water from here in future emergencies. Are people talking about this?
Commissioner, at this point in time, the closest a conversation to regionality on this issue is that we have that Coastal Conservancy group working on looking at the bigger picture, because they're not just one jurisdiction, and they're trying to bring all the jurisdictions together in the watershed to talk about. Have we gotten close enough to talk about measures in that process yet? No. But if we all start doing small parts, the bigger good will be affected in a way that should help with the flooding. And that's why we're in constant contact too.
Thank you.
I'll add one thing about flood conveyance in this area, and because it's such a huge watershed, the other thing to think about other than the waters themselves is the sediment, and the sediment is bringing the sand to our beaches and all kinds of other things I don't know very much about, but we want to be careful not to restrict the sediment movement along from the watersheds as well. And so part of this is trying to improve the conveyance of the sediment that's getting stuck on Caneros Creek that can go flow straight back on to our beaches.
Eric?
Just a couple questions. The first is, I know it's a lot different at the airport than, say, down at the waterfront. Is there any of the infrastructure that you're looking at that could be moved, that you would plan to be, that would actually, in the long range, you'd plan to move it? For example, down the waterfront, the El Estero, that's something you're looking at the 2090 on trying to relocate it to other areas. Might have read something in Newshawk about it. But one is that, and then the other is with some of the expansion projects that are coming up, how does that impact this? And then as part of that, would there be any mitigation measures that, say we're going to construct these new facilities, the expansion, that as part of that you could get funding to address some of these solutions that we need here, so there would be a potential funding source within those to offset those projects within the airport itself?
That was the one I was going to do, Chris. We're going to start with the second, and then Chris is going to add. So any improvements that we have on our CIP for the coming 2 to 5 years, those buildings, like our terminal improvement project, do have to be built to certain standards to take them out of the floodway. Our current terminal was built that way too. And when you look at a project like the Southfield parking lot where the rental cars are, we had to put in a certain amount of permeable pavement to offset all of that hardscape. And that's so the water doesn't just flow over that hardscape and is going back into our groundwater. So building codes, green building codes, those take care of the second part of that question. I don't know if Chris has anything to add.
Just to add on to that a little bit, we have our drainage master plan that has a lot of improvements that we need to look at going forward on the airport. So as we do projects, say the Taxiway Bravo extension, things like that, we look to that drainage master plan to see if there's projects that are included in that we need to include in the smaller project, and some of those would be potentially fundable by the FAA grant. If there's drainage that we can put in as a part of that project that also aligns with all of these other planning documents.
And additionally, on the grant front, in 2024, grants were being rolled out for resiliencies. Airports we're not unique. Airports flood because they need to be built in a flat area. That's normally areas that have been filled in by previous people living in that area. And so we have a lot of airports in the U.S. that have flooding issues, and we don't think that those resiliency grants have stalled. They just slowed down because of the change in guard, and we expect those to be coming forward again sometime soon. The first part of your question, Councilman, can you just repeat it?
Well, if there's any infrastructure now that, we saw pictures earlier that the buildings get flooded, and it's going to be very hard to address it. So is there plans to potentially relocate those, as hard as it might be? And that's why I use the example of the wastewater treatment plant. Very complicated to move, but it is something that we're looking at out into 2090. So are there any of the facilities here being looked at as we can take mitigation measures now in the near term, but then 65 years out they might be relocated?
I think as you look at redevelopment of the whole airport, we're pretty far along on the south side of the airport for the commercial terminal. You'll see this area that we're sitting in right now with the FBO redevelopment. Any of those new facilities are going to be built to the new standards and elevated. The worst part is going to still be in where we flooded, and so until we look at redeveloping that area more, we're either going to have to stop using some of the buildings potentially if things don't improve, or look towards reconstruction, which would be at a higher elevation, looking at all of these.
Okay, so reconstruction might be an option instead of flat out moving it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other follow-up questions? No? We do have a speaker request on this. Mark, are you here?
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mark Chatillo, and I'm here on behalf of the Santa Barbara Audubon Society. I have been working with the Audubon Society for a number of years, and we wanted to make a presentation, just give a little bit of background information and public comment about the goals and interests that we have in the Goleta Slough, including on the airport's property. And we recently made a presentation at the Goleta Slough Management Committee and have had the benefit of working with airport staff. So we're part of this process. We were referenced as one of the stakeholders, and just wanted to share with the commission members and staff the interests that we have, and our hope that we can continue to work productively and integrate the issues that we carry forward. The principal goal that Audubon has with respect to the Goleta Slough, the entire slough, is to secure the commitment of all of the agencies to work and identify the habitat and ecological features as a comparable priority, along with implementing the vision and the mission of all of the various organizations. To date, there's been sort of some piecemealing approach. We started in response to the Mosquito Vector and Management District and activities that they had been doing historically, using a vehicle on the airport property and elsewhere in the slough, and using materials that were having an adverse ecological impact. So we've been working actively with them, and that's been productive. But one of the key species that Audubon is particularly concerned about is a bird, the Belding's Savannah sparrow. It's a small bird. It's not prone to bird strike risk on a substantial manner, but it is the northernmost extent of its range. It lives in coastal wetlands down between San Diego and a little bit maybe into Mexico, and the Goleta Slough is its northern extension. And the population of this bird, along with a number of other birds, has been declining precipitously. And so Audubon is particularly interested in elevating the understanding and the awareness around this bird and the other birds that are using the slough, along with the other animals and critters that make it an ecosystem that's worth working on. So, so our goals are to really try and raise the consciousness and to elevate the priority for some of the ecological features that are present here. We appreciate working with Ms. Metzger in providing access. That's one of the key issues that Audubon wants to expand, is researcher access for monitoring and review of impact, and to be able to better understand what are the status of these populations of birds. And that's the second part, is monitoring, having more access and committing to more routine monitoring of these bird populations. We're working with the Vector District on that. It involves all of the agencies, and obviously given the airport's ownership and their management of these lands, and now dealing with flooding and the climate adaptation plan, these are all issues that need to be integrated. And I appreciate very much the professional staff, both the airport staff, the city staff people, as well as the consultants that have been brought to this, that get these issues. I mean, these are not new. They present themselves in a lot of different areas, but given the state of coastal estuaries and coastal wetlands in our state and throughout the country, the damages have been substantial on a percentage basis. We need to protect and restore those that we have here. One of the key actions that we're pretty excited about is the routine opening of the Goleta Slough. That has benefits to the Mosquito Abatement District because having regular flows of water coming through reduces their need to apply pesticides or larvicides and control those risks. There's a benefit to airport operations because, as mentioned, with saltwater and tidal flows, you don't have the larger birds that present the same risks to aviation. And so, and of course, there's ecological benefits from just restoring that those natural patterns. So we are hopeful that we can work cooperatively and try and advance that as an objective. So
Don't want to cut you off too much there, but we are over our 3 minutes.
I appreciate that. Let me just one more point about the climate adaptation plan, and that is just that we want to make sure that we do integrate these ecological considerations as we go through and look at these different measures. So thank you very much. We really appreciate the opportunity to address you and the good work, and thanks, kudos to staff for all that you do, and we certainly appreciate the good work of the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Any other questions, follow-up? Hearing none. I believe that brings us to the end of the presentation and the end of the questions. No motion required. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.